quiet before the fire. The first-class cabin of Apex Air Flight 723 wasn't just a section of an airplane. It was a temple, a glass and leather sanctuary in the sky, where the clink of crystal glasses replaced the roar of humanity that raged beyond the curtain in economy. It smelled faintly of citrus and polished wood. The air conditioning purred with the precision of a luxury car. Everything was designed to suggest serenity, exclusivity, control. But serenity has a fragile skin. And that night, it tore open in the space between seat 2A and the man who dared to occupy it. The presence in 2A. Damian Hayes sat there, spine straight, still as stone. A man who carried silence like armor. At 42, he had the look of someone who had long ago realized volume was unnecessary. Power wasn't measured in decibels. It was measured in what happened after you stopped speaking. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored with microscopic precision. His shoes gleamed without ostentation. His watch was understated steel rather than gold. He had learned early that flash drew attention, but presence commanded it. In his hands, not a glowing screen or tablet, but a paperback copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The edges were dog-eared, the spine cracked. He carried it on every trip as a reminder that while markets, deals, and fortunes shifted like storms, discipline and principle did not. Damian had boarded quietly, exchanging a nod with a young flight attendant, Sarah, who offered him a smile that faltered with fatigue. He asked only for water, still no ice. He read her name tag deliberately before thanking her. A small habit, almost trivial, but one he clung to. See the person, not the uniform. Around him, the archetypes of first class trickled in like actors filling a stage. The blonde businesswoman with a scarf tied like armor, the yacht shirt retiree fiddling with his Rolex, the hedge fund kid who couldn't lower his voice. Damian absorbed them all with peripheral awareness, his eyes steady on the page. Then came the disruption. Preston Holloway. The piece cracked with the arrival of Preston Holloway. A storm of entitlement squeezed into salmon-colored polo and ripped designer jeans. His collar was popped. His gold watch reflected cabin lights like a weaponized sun. His voice arrived before he did, booming through the hush like an uninvited brass band. No, I told Chad it's 9 figures, or forget it. Non-starter. I'll be wheels down by 4. Have the car ready. No excuses. He ended the call with a loud snap of his phone and scanned the cabin with the easy arrogance of a man certain everything belonged to him. His gaze caught 2B, empty, and then flicked to Damian. His eyes lingered, traveled up and down, and in that flicker Damian read an entire unspoken sentence. It was a language he knew by heart. You don't belong here. You can be moved. Preston didn't ask permission. He tossed his duffel onto 2B like staking a claim, then barked at Sarah. Hey, I'm in 3D, but this one's open, right? I'll take it. Better legroom. Sarah's smile strained, the one she had stitched onto her face by years of training. I'm sorry, sir. This seat is reserved for crew rest on certain long-haul connections. I can't move you until... Policy, right? Preston scoffed. Fine. Just give me a Macallan 18. Neat. And don't drown it in ice like last time. He flopped into 3D, directly behind Damian, already muttering about inefficiency. The sanctuary's fragile skin stretched thinner. Damian didn't react. He turned a page. For a moment, peace seemed restored. The doors closed, the engines whined to life, and the plane began its slow crawl toward takeoff. Then Sarah returned, no smile now, only hesitation trembling in her hands. Beside her stood the purser, Coleman, a man with silver-streaked hair and the clipped bearing of someone who mistook seniority for authority. His jaw was tight, his eyes calculating. Mr. Hayes, Coleman began, his voice rehearsed, I'm afraid there's been an error. The error. Damian closed his book carefully, sliding his finger between the pages. His eyes lifted. Calm. Cold. An error? Coleman cleared his throat. Yes, sir. It appears your seat, 2A, has been double-booked. He said the word double-booked as if it were a rare disease, an unfortunate inevitability. Damian lifted his phone and displayed the digital boarding pass he had checked in with 24 hours earlier. He also tapped the printed slip tucked into his portfolio. Boarding pass issued yesterday. I was the first check-in. There is no double booking. Coleman avoided his gaze, staring somewhere over his shoulder. The other passenger has priority status. These things happen. We'd like to reseat you in premium economy. Extra legroom. Voucher for your trouble. Damien's eyebrow rose a fraction. Priority? He held executive platinum. Top tier. There was no higher rung for a civilian flyer. From behind him came the venomous sigh. "Oh, for God's sake," Preston grumbled loudly. "Just take the deal, man. It's a good seat for someone like you. Don't make a scene." The words hung in the cabin, heavy as lead. Someone like you. The passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting, but no one spoke. Sarah flinched. Coleman pressed on. "Sir, we need the seat. This is our final position. If you refuse, we'll have to involve ground security." It was a threat, dressed in the false courtesy of customer service. Humiliation wrapped in policy. The decision. The cabin fell into a silence that was not calm but brittle, waiting to shatter. Damien studied Coleman's face. The mask of bureaucracy. Preston's, smug, certain. Sarah's, shame, unspoken apology. He had built his empire not on emotion, but calculation. And in this moment, clarity came sharp as glass. He unbuckled his belt. The click was loud as a gunshot. "That won't be necessary," Damien said, voice steady. "You've made your position clear." He rose. He collected his paperback, his briefcase. He paused only once at Sarah's side. His voice dropped so low only she could hear. "I'm sorry you were put in this position." Her eyes flickered, gratitude, sorrow, fear. Then Damien Hayes walked the narrow aisle, past faces that refused to meet his eyes, past the gate of leather and champagne, through the jet bridge, out into the fluorescent honesty of the terminal. The door closed behind him with a sound that was both final and fatal. The cliffhanger. In 2A, Preston leaned back. Victoria's grin plastered across his face, as if he'd just won something. Coleman exhaled relief, already scribbling notes for his incident report. Sarah's hands shook as she poured Preston's whiskey. None of them realized they hadn't just lost a seat. They had lost a $500 million future. And the man who had walked away wasn't angry. He was calculating. The calm before the inferno. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The hum of the terminal washed over Damien like static. The chatter of boarding announcements. The rhythmic squeak of luggage wheels. The distant hiss of an espresso machine. All of it blurred into white noise. He carried his briefcase and his battered copy of Meditations like anchors, but inside, the calm he projected was laced with something sharper. He wasn't angry. Anger was heat, messy, fleeting, uncontrolled. What he felt was cold, a clarity that could cut glass. He had just been shown a truth, not for the first time, but in a way so public, so undeniable, it demanded a response. The lounge. The Apex Admirals Club was polished veneer. Marble counters, walnut paneling, leather chairs arranged like business chess pieces. The receptionist, Brenda, brightened when she saw him. "Mr. Hayes, did you forget something?" "No," Damien replied smoothly. "My plans have changed. I'll need the conference room." Her brows lifted, but she didn't ask. She led him to a glass-walled cube at the back of the lounge. Inside, the world narrowed. 6 chairs, a glossy table, a hush so deep it felt padded. When the door clicked shut, Damien finally exhaled. Not a sigh of defeat, a recalibration. He placed the book on the table, his hand lingering on its worn cover, then reached for his phone. The call. Chloe Martinez answered on the second ring. Her voice was crisp, focused, always ready. "Damien, I thought you'd be airborne." "There's been a change of plans," he said, his baritone steady. "Cancel tomorrow's 4 p.m. with Sterling." A pause. He could hear the keystroke stop mid-word. "The Apex signing?" "Damien, that's 6 months of negotiations. Their entire board is flying in." "Cancel it," he repeated. "Effective immediately. And notify legal. We're terminating intent under Section 4B. Material breach of shared values." Another pause. Longer. He imagined her pinching the bridge of her nose. mind already spinning through ramifications. Chloe never questioned lightly, but she trusted his judgment like gospel. "What reason should I give?" she asked finally. "None. Send the notice. Redirect all contact to legal." Her voice tightened, all hesitation burned away by professionalism. "Understood." He ended the call. Just like that, $500 million vaporized. Not in a boardroom, not in a negotiation. Over a seat. The memory. Damien sat back, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on a reflection of himself in the glossy table. He thought of Marcus Aurelius's line, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." What had just happened on Flight 723 wasn't right. It wasn't true. It was prejudice dressed as policy. He thought of Sarah's eyes, wide, apologetic, trapped. Of Coleman's rigid authority, rehearsed and hollow. Of Preston's smirk, dripping entitlement. And he thought of his mentor, Dr. Alastair Finch, waiting in Chicago. The man who had lifted him from scholarship kid to MIT graduate. The man who had taught him that every system, whether in physics or society, had fault lines. The lesson had been simple. Observe the failure. Learn from it. Never build on it again. That was all this was. A fault line revealed. The contrast. An hour later, Damien walked onto another jet bridge, this time from Meridian Airways. The boarding process was calm, almost invisible. The attendant scanned his pass, smiled without forced cheer, and welcomed him by name. No hesitation. No question. "Seat 1A, Mr. Hayes. May I take your briefcase?" The words were ordinary, but after the theater humiliation he had endured, they felt profound. He sank into the seat, noting the subtle difference. Smaller cabin, fewer frills, but competence radiated from every corner. The flight attendant, George, returned moments later. "Still water, no ice." "Correct." Damien blinked. "Yes." George smiled faintly. "You're a frequent guest with US. We try to remember. No spectacle. No deference. Just service done well." Damien felt his pulse settle into its old rhythm. As the plane climbed, he opened meditations again. The passage's eyes landed on seemed chosen by fate. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The guilt. Meanwhile, back on Flight 723, Sarah's hands trembled as she poured Preston's whiskey. Coleman sat rigid, reviewing his report, rehearsing his justification. Preston chuckled, feet stretched wide, basking in unearned victory. But Sarah's mind replayed the moment Damien leaned close. "I'm sorry you were put in this position." It hadn't been absolution. It had been recognition. He saw her powerlessness. And that knowledge burned worse than anger. She had dreamed of flying first-class cabins since she was a girl, but the reality was serving drinks while swallowing injustice. She flipped through the crew manual during her break. Integrity, respect, inclusion, words that mocked her now. If integrity meant anything, she had failed it. By the time the plane leveled at 35,000 feet, Sarah knew she would never forget his face. The celebration. Across the country, at Apex Air's gleaming Texas headquarters, champagne chilled in crystal buckets. Richard Sterling, silver-haired and tanned, strutted through corridors like a king returning from war. "Tomorrow," he boomed to his assistant, "we secure our future. Project Skynet will make Apex untouchable." He was already picturing the press release, the stock surge, the accolades. He imagined shaking Damien Hayes' hand before cameras, sealing the partnership that would save his airline from financial ruin. At that very moment, an email alert blinked on his chief legal officer's screen. A notice of termination. Section 4B. Effective immediately. The celebration had already turned to ash. The spark inside Damien. Back in seat 1A of the Meridian flight, Damien closed his book and let the words echo in his mind. His decision hadn't been revenge. It hadn't even been anger. It had been data. The incident on Apex wasn't just a seat dispute. It was a data point revealing systemic rot. An airline willing to humiliate a loyal customer to appease entitlement could not be trusted with the backbone of a global logistics network. And he didn't build palaces on rotten foundations. He reached for his phone, Typed a short note to Chloe. Meridian flight on time. Will land in Chicago as planned. Prepare statement for board. Integrity above profit. Will explain in detail. He hesitated, then added a second line. Also, thank you. Because in a world full of Colemans and Prestons, Chloe's steady competence was a fortress. He set the phone aside. Outside the window, clouds stretched like a sea of white marble. The engines roared steady, untroubled. Damien closed his eyes. The chaos had already begun behind him. But here, in the sanctuary of competence, he found stillness again. Cliffhanger. At Apex headquarters, Sterling's smile froze as he stared at the termination notice. His hands shook. He read the name again. Mr. D. Hayes. The room went silent. He didn't yet know that his own nephew was the other passenger. He didn't yet know that a $500 million bridge had been burned beyond repair. But Damien Hayes knew, and as Meridian Flight 9001 cut through the clouds, he understood one thing with chilling clarity. He hadn't just walked off a plane. He had set fire to an empire. Richard Sterling stared at the email like it might blink first. Notice of termination of intent. Section 4B. Material breach of shared corporate values. Effective immediately. Words that should have lived only in legal hypotheticals now throbbed like a migraine in his inbox. He read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition could unravel reality. Outside his glass-walled office, Apex Air's executive floor gleamed. White marble, oil paintings of propeller-era glory, a logo in brushed steel that had always felt immutable. Inside, the future had just been unplugged. David. Sterling barked into his console. The chief legal officer appeared in the doorway moments later, jacket half on, face already flushed. Tell me this is a phishing scam. David didn't sit. It's not. Signed by Aetheria's outside counsel. Timestamp 11:04 Eastern. Hayes was on our flight at 11:04. Sterling snapped. He was supposed to be airborne. He couldn't. David swallowed. The notice is valid under preliminary agreement. Silence, heavy and clinical. Give me the manifest for Flight 723, Sterling said, voice low, and the purser's incident report. Now. 20 minutes later, the war room coalesced. A conference table littered with tablets, legal pads, sweating glasses of water. The VP of Customer Relations, a PR director with eyes like a hunted animal, 2 deputy counsels, and David. Sterling paced, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a general searching a map for a bridge that no longer existed. David slid a tablet across the table. Manifest, 723 JFK to ORD, first class. Name scrolled past. Sterling's finger halted. Hayes Damien, 2A. The letters might as well have been a detonator code. Incident report? He asked. The purser's narrative was neat, bloodless. A system glitch, a duplicate seat assignment, a minor customer disturbance, a voluntary deboarding after compensation offered. Delay, 22 minutes. Resolution, standard procedure. Voluntary deboarding, Sterling echoed, voice scraping. They escorted the man whose signature would have saved his company off our airplane and called it voluntary. The PR director ventured, we can fix this. Apologized publicly. Offer to. Sterling's finger flicked to the next name. It stopped cold. An ache opened beneath his ribs. Holloway, Preston, 3D. His nephew. For a second, every noise in the room vanished. The HVAC hum, the faint clatter from the outer office, breath itself. He saw a montage of Thanksgiving tables and family pools and a careful network of favors that had always been a family sport. A courtesy status code, a birthday gesture. Harmless, he had thought. Distant lightning. He looked up. Everyone was watching him, waiting for the flavor of his rage. Get my nephew on the phone, he said. No one moved. Now. Preston answered on the second ring, voice syruped with self-satisfaction. Uncle Rich, you should have seen the service today. Some guy made a stink about a seat. Your crew handled it. Upgraded me. No problem. Your name still opens doors. The room watched Sterling turn a shade no one had ever seen on him. He spoke very calmly. Preston, the guy you displaced was Damien Hayes. A beat? Who? The CEO of E3IA Dynamics, Sterling said, each word an ice cube. He was scheduled to sign a $500 million contract with us tomorrow. He just terminated it. Dead air. Then a pitiful, scrambling sound. I didn't know. He didn't say, look, it wasn't my fault, the flight chief. The purser? Sterling cut in. We'll deal with him. But you sat there and watched it happen. And now you will sit with the consequences. He ended the call. The room exhaled. For the first time, Sterling looked smaller than his office. Fire the purser, he said to David. Effective immediately. Put him on a plane to Fort Worth tonight. I want a full chain of custody on the decision. I want names. I want to know who trained him to call prejudice a glitch. The PR director cleared her throat. We need a holding statement. You'll get one, Sterling said, after I get Hayes on the phone. He dialed the number he had courted like a donor. Dinners, introductions, 2 rounds of golf he hated. The call was intercepted on the first ring. Chloe Martinez. A voice said, professional, frosted glass. Ms. Martinez, Richard Sterling, Apex Air. I need to speak to Mr. Hayes. Now. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Hayes is unavailable. Please direct all communications to our legal team. Please, Chloe, Ms. Martinez. This was a misunderstanding. I will personally. Our position is reflected in the notice, she said, tone never rising, never falling. Good day. The line clicked. Sterling stared at the dead phone like it had betrayed him out of spite. Draft the apology, he told PR. Personal. Mine. Offer whatever it takes. The PR director nodded, already typing. And call the board, Sterling added. Emergency session at 3. At 37,000 feet, the world was blessedly quiet. Damien sat in 1A on Meridian, book open, eyes on the clouds. He felt the phantom tremor of chaos radiating through the networks his phone could summon with a swipe, but he let it pass. George refilled his water without a word. Damien underlined a line in Meditations. If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone. On the notepad tucked into the seat pocket, he sketched a small diagram. 2 boxes labeled System Design and Human Override. An arrow between them snapped in half. Underneath he wrote, Trust equals data plus culture. If either fails, trust fails. He thought briefly of Sterling, silvered, sun-faded, trying to pull a ripcord that wasn't attached to the parachute. He thought more of Sarah, whose hands had trembled as she poured a drink. He could still hear her voice from the aisle, small and strained, trying to turn policy into mercy and failing. Across the aisle, a businessman snored softly. Engines droned. A steward laughed quietly by the galley. Civilization at cruising altitude, ordered and intact, because the people inside respected each other and their roles. He felt something close to grief for how simple it could be. His phone buzzed once in airplane mode, a cued notification from a gate. Board delayed 22 minutes. He almost smiled. Precision down to the minute, recorded by a system that never asked why. The why always belonged to people. In Queens, Sarah sat at a tiny kitchen table, her uniform folded with military neatness beside a chipped bowl of ramen gone cold. The apartment was the kind of small that forced choices, sofa or dining table, never both. Her phone lay between her palms like a confession she had not yet written. She had reread the value statement 4 times. Integrity, respect, inclusion. She could still hear Coleman's voice saying final position, could still feel her throat close when Preston said someone like you. When Damien had apologized to her, for being put in this position, shame had surged up so violently it felt like motion sickness. She opened a secure messaging app and stared at a name she had saved after a documentary made her cry alone on her couch. Michael Chun, Investigations. Mr. Chun, she typed. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am a flight attendant for Apex Air. I worked first class on Flight 723 today. You're going to hear a story about a contract being canceled. You should know what really happened. Her thumbs hovered. The fear wasn't abstract. It had a rent amount, a parent's phone number she sent money to, a student loan balance. She attached a photo of her crew ID, a screenshot of her schedule, a redacted copy of the purser's glitch memo she had photographed in the mirror in the galley. She added the line that mattered most. It wasn't a glitch. It was prejudice, and we all complied. She hit send and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth as if she'd shouted. A single checkmark appeared, then a second, then 3 dots. Can we talk on the record? Michael wrote. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, her hands had stopped shaking. Yes, she typed. Sterling's apology draft came back fast and glossy. Too glossy. He stripped out the PR varnish, unfortunate incident, isolated lapse, and wrote with a pen instead, ink scratching like penance, we failed. I failed. I am sorry. It wasn't enough, but at least it sounded like a person, not a logo. He hit send to Chloe's email and Hayes' counsel and waited for gravity to reverse. It didn't. The only reply he received was from counsel. Your apology is acknowledged. Our position remains unchanged. He felt, finally, the free fall he'd been pretending he wasn't in. Schedule a press conference, he told PR. 2 hours. We'll own it publicly. Sir, PR said, voice thin, there's something else. What? She turned her tablet so he could see. A tweet stared back. A thread from an account with a small blue check mark and a reputation he knew too well. Michael Chun, developing. Airline faces internal claims that a top-tier black passenger was removed from his paid first-class seat for a connected white flyer. The fallout allegedly cost the airline a $500 million tech deal. If you witness Flight 723, JF Gardy, my DMs are open. Below it, already dozens of replies. Former employees. Customers with old bones to pick. The rumor membrane had ruptured. Sterling's chest tightened. The oxygen felt thin in his own building. Find out who talked, he said, though he knew the answer didn't matter anymore. Lightning had already found its ground. In the aisle of Meridian 9001, George paused by 1A. Another water? Please, Damien said. George set it down. For what it's worth, he said softly, we're glad you're flying with us. Damien met his eyes and nodded. The words landed with more weight than they carried. Not affirmation. Alignment. He reopened his book, but didn't read. He thought of systems again, of code that only worked because the people who wrote it refused to lie to themselves about what it was doing. He thought of the meeting he would keep in Chicago, for himself, not for business. The one that had always mattered more. His phone, still inert on airplane mode, held a world about to tilt. In 2 hours, a headline would harden. A hashtag would catch. Stock tickers would vibrate. Lawyers would swarm. Apologies would be squeezed like toothpaste. And somewhere in Queens, a woman who had decided to be brave would sleep for the first time in weeks. At 37,000 feet, the cabin lights dimmed. Damien closed his eyes. Cliffhanger. In a newsroom across the river, an editor read Sarah's verified message and nodded to Michael. Run it if she's on record. Michael's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then flew. The headline bar blinked, waiting for a single, final keystroke. He pressed publish. The Wall Street Journal headline detonated like a grenade at dawn. Billion-dollar bigotry. How a first-class ejection cost Apex Air a $500 million deal. Michael Chen's byline glared beneath it, but the story belonged to Sarah Jenkins. She was named, quoted, photographed. She had gone on record with trembling resolve, her crew ID visible beside her in the portrait. It wasn't just reporting, it was an indictment. The article laid everything bare. Coleman's computer glitch lie, Preston Holloway's smug taunts, the final humiliation of asking a loyal, top-tier black executive to surrender his paid seat for the airline CEO's white nephew. And then, the chilling consequence. Damien Hayes walking off quietly and vaporizing $500 million with one phone call. It read less like journalism and more like a fable. And it spread like wildfire. Viral inferno. By 7 a.m., the hashtags were everywhere. Hashtag BoycottPecs sat at number 1 worldwide, flanked by hashtag SeatGate, and a meme of a pop polo collar captioned, priority status. Disgruntled ex-employees piled on, recounting horror stories of classist rot, ignored safety complaints, favoritism, discriminatory seating errors. Business travelers posted pictures of their shredded loyalty cards beside new bookings on rival airlines. Memes paired Apex's glossy ad slogan, "The Higher Standard," with Chen's most damning line. At Apex Air, a seat in first class wasn't secured by loyalty or merit. It was secured by privilege. By market open at 9:30, Apex's ticker symbol, APX, nosedived. The drop was so sharp it drew gasps on the trading floor. Down 18% in the first hour. By noon, down 27%. In 4 hours, more than $1.2 billion in market cap evaporated. Double the value of the canceled deal. Apex wasn't just a struggling airline anymore. It was the villain of the week. And villains bleed fast in the digital coliseum. Sterling at the podium. Richard Sterling faced the press like a man entering a courtroom where he was both defendant and witness. The conference room brimmed with cameras, microphones bristling like spears. His tan looked ashen under the television lights. He read from the prepared statement, each word cracking with strain. On behalf of Apex Air, I want to extend my deepest and sincerest apologies for the incident on Flight 723. What occurred does not reflect our values as a company. It was an isolated failure of protocol, and we are taking immediate corrective action. Hands shot up like arrows. Mr. Sterling, the article names your nephew, Preston Holloway, as the passenger who received the displaced seat. Can you confirm this? Sterling faltered. This incident involved a failure in procedure by one of our crew. He has been terminated. Are you denying your nephew's involvement? Another journalist shouted. Sterling's throat worked. Apex Air does not base seating decisions on family connections. The room erupted. Reporters barked questions over each other. Then why was Mr. Hayes removed? Why was the lie about a glitch repeated? How can you claim shared values when your own family benefits from prejudice? His evasions sounded like confessions. Every denial was a shovel digging deeper. By the time he exited, sweat beating his temples, the damage was irreversible. Clips of his stammering non-denial looped endlessly online with captions like "the glitch in human form." The statement that landed. At 2 p.m., E3IA Dynamics released its own message. No press conference, no theatrics, just a clean, white page on their site and a tweet linking to it. At E3IA Dynamics, we believe dignity is a non-negotiable asset. A company's character is revealed not in marketing slogans, but in how it treats every individual in its ecosystem. We only partner with organizations that demonstrate an unwavering commitment to respect and integrity, not as aspirational ideals, but as operational realities. Our business is built on trust. We will not compromise that principle, not for any price. It never mentioned Apex, which made it more devastating. Analysts and commentators hailed it as a masterclass in brand positioning. Customers lauded the clarity. The business press reframed Damian Hayes overnight from vindictive CO to principled leader. His decision wasn't retaliation, it was risk management. Where Sterling looked panicked, Hayes looked inevitable. Sarah's new path. In her tiny Queens apartment. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, watching her own name scroll across news tickers. She had been fired within hours of Chen's story, terminated for a violation of confidentiality agreement. She had cried, not for the job, but for the avalanche of attention that came after. Then came the calls. Meridian Airways reached her first, not with a flight attendant position, but with an offer, consultant for their new customer integrity initiative. Her bravery would shape their training programs, their culture, their promise. For the first time, Sarah felt her voice carried weight. Her silence on 723 had made her complicit. Her voice now made her free. Preston in the shadows. Preston Holloway's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Not with friends. Those had gone silent, but with strangers. His face was now the meme. Priority Preston. Job offers rescinded. His trust fund reputation torched online. Reporters camped outside his condo. Neighbors whispering in the elevator. His uncle's cold dismissal of the phone still echoed. You've destroyed this family's name. For Preston, the seat in 2A had become a permanent exile. He had taken a throne and turned it into a pillory. Sterling's desperation. That evening, Sterling's office was a tomb. The champagne buckets remained, now warm, bottles unopened. His assistant hovered helplessly as he reread Etheria's statement for the 10th time, the words gouging deeper with every pass. He dialed Hayes's number again, straight to voicemail. He typed a long, groveling email offering double donations, permanent platinum status, anything. The reply from Etheria's counsel was colder than the first. Our position remains unchanged. Consider this matter closed. Sterling set the phone down, his hand trembling. Outside his window, the Dallas skyline glowed, indifferent. His empire, built on polish and privilege, was burning from the inside out. Meridian's rise. 2 days later, E3IA announced exclusive negotiations with Meridian Airways, the very airline that had carried Hayes to Chicago with quiet competence. The announcement was a surgical strike. Meridian stock soared 22% in a day. Apex flatlined. The market understood the symbolism. Respect had value. Integrity could move billions. It was poetic justice. Hayes hadn't just punished Apex. He had rewarded Meridian. Damien's stillness. In Chicago, Damien strolled to the ivy-covered walkways of the University of Chicago campus, shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Alastair Finch. His mentor's hair was thinner now, his cane steady, but his eyes still held galaxies. I saw the news, Finch rasped. They're crucifying that airline. But Damien, won't they paint you as ruthless? Vindictive? They can, Damien replied. His voice was calm, not defensive. It wasn't revenge. It was a data point. Apex lied about a glitch to cover prejudice. If they lie about that, they'd lie about safety logs or maintenance records. I couldn't entrust a global system to a partner built on sand. Finch nodded slowly. So you walked. I calculated. Damien corrected. And then I walked. They stopped under the same oak tree where Finch had once tutored a scholarship kid with more hunger than money. Damien rested a hand on the bark, grounding himself. The world could spin, stocks could crash, headlines could roar, but this tree, this moment, was real. The system showed me its flaw, he murmured. I responded accordingly. Cliffhanger. That night, on Apex's trading floor, emergency lights glowed as executives scrambled, phones glued to ears. Sterling stared at a terminal as the stock dipped lower and lower, each tick another nail. His nephew had become a meme. His flight attendant had become a whistleblower. His partner had become his executioner. And the man at the center of it all, the quiet black CEO who never raised his voice, wasn't even watching collapse. He was reading Meditations, underlining the same line again. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. 6 months is enough time to rebrand a lie or bury it. It is also enough time to watch consequences bloom in brutal daylight. Apex Air no longer existed. On a humid Thursday morning, a larger rival acquired the airline for pennies on a dollar, a fire sale structured more as a mercy killing than a merger. The deal memo was clinical where the world had been savage. Asset absorption, fleet rationalization, brand retirement. In plain terms, the logo was gone, the lounges shuttered, the name filed under once. Richard Sterling signed the last document with a pen that rattled against the page. He did not hold a press conference. He resigned in a paragraph, accepted a non-disparagement clause, and walked through the lobby he had designed to look like the foyer of a museum. The marble did not blink. The glass doors did not protest. Empires die quietly when the paperwork is correct. Preston Holloway did not attend any ceremony because there was none. His notoriety had hardened into a cultural shorthand. Priority Preston, a punchline in HR seminars, an example in ethics decks, a cautionary tale about unearned access. He learned how silence sounds when it is not peace but exile. He moved out of his condo at night. The elevator did not ask where he was going. Coleman's name passed through the industry like a bad smell, not hated exactly, but avoided. He was not hired again by any major carrier. He started an online travel consultancy that specialized in elite strategies. It never took off. There are some businesses the market recognizes as apologies dressed in sales. Sarah Jenkins did not disappear into the churn. The morning after the acquisition, she stood in a conference room at Meridian Airways headquarters. The view wasn't glamorous. A block of skyline interrupted by an honest skyline of cranes and rooftops, but the room vibrated with purpose. 20 new hire trainees watched her, notebooks open, eyes bright. Behind them, 3 senior managers and a newly appointed VP of Customer Integrity, her program, stood quietly, not to judge but to witness. Sarah clicked to the next slide. Case study, Flight 723. She showed photos of an aisle and a seat map and a policy page. She did not raise her voice. She told the truth like it was a checklist. Integrity is not a sentiment, she said. Steady now. It's a sequence, a system. It's what you do when the person you can't afford to lose looks like someone you've been taught to ignore. A trainee raised a hand. What did it feel like in the moment? Small, Sarah answered. Like I'd been narrowed to a uniform and a script. The day I spoke, I felt large again. Not important, just full size. They wrote that down. Meridian would name the program full-sized. It would spread from training to hiring to vendor contracts. A culture isn't a slogan. It is muscle memory. They decided to practice. Across town, E3IA Dynamics unveiled its logistics platform inside Meridian's Operations Center, a glass nerve hub humming with maps and numbers that move like weather. On a wall of displays, green lines threaded across continents, constellations of optimized routes dancing in silence. Delays were predicted and corrected. Crews were rotated with dignity instead of exhaustion. The system paid attention because the people who made it demanded that it did. Analysts called the rollout flawless. Then, 2 weeks later, boringly flawless, which is the highest praise a system can earn. The joint press conference was short and almost awkward. 2 companies refusing to peacock while doing excellent work. Stocks adjusted accordingly. The world shrugged at competence until it needed it and then called it miracle. Damian Hayes refused to claim the miracle. He signed documents, shook hands with Meridian CEO, and left the building in under 11 minutes. He did not stop for cameras. He had somewhere else to be, at the University of Chicago. Summer leaned into the quad, the trees exhaling a green so deep it felt like forgiveness. Damian walked slowly at his mentor's pace, his own hands empty for once. No briefcase, no phone, no book. Dr. Alistair Finch paused under their old oak, the cane planted like a period. I've been reading your press, Finch said dryly. Don't, Damian replied. It tend to confuse me with someone interesting. Finch chuckled, then sobered. They say you burn a company. I declined to build on sand, Damian said. Fire was a natural consequence of a lack of stone. Finch studied him. Do you ever wonder if the boy I met in this exact spot, hungry, stubborn, would be proud of the man who traded $500 million for a principal? I wonder if he'd be surprised it only cost that much. Damian smiled, small and private. He thought integrity would be more expensive. They sat on the bench. Students drifted past in clots of laughter. Somewhere, a bike chain skipped. In the normalness of it, the drama shrank to scale. Alistair, Damian said, choosing the old intimacy. I keep thinking about systems, not just code. People. You can architect perfect software and still fail if the humans feeding it are trained to lie. Apex's code might have worked. Their culture guaranteed it wouldn't. Then you did what good engineers do, Finch said. You removed the dependency. Exactly. Damian leaned back, eyes on the leaves. Etheria's motto always sounded like marketing. Trust at scale. Now it feels like instruction. You cannot scale what you can't trust. They were quiet. The oak wrote light on the ground. Children do not read meditations, but sometimes grown men circle back to the pages they needed and find new lines written between the old ones. On the bench, neither spoke the famous sentence aloud, but both of them knew it. You cannot control what happens. You can control your response. Back downtown, a small ceremony unfolded that no one televised. At Meridian HQ, Sarah received an employee badge, not with wings but with her name embossed on a card that opened doors. The VP pinned it to her lanyard and shook her hand. "We're not hiring your trauma," she said quietly. "We're hiring your standards." Sarah nodded. In the elevator, going down alone, she looked at her reflection and did not apologize to it. In a city of glass, she was not see-through anymore. In Fort Worth, Sterling stood in his stripped office and opened a desk drawer. The last item inside was a plastic model of the airline's first plane. He held it as if weight would argue for meaning. On the underside, someone had written in marker, years ago, "Higher Standard." He put the plane into a box and left it there. On a street nobody photographed, Preston handed a set of keys to a realtor and walked away. If you want to know what consequence sounds like, it is not a gavel. It is rubber wheels on a suitcase privately at night, in a conference room with too much light. Etheria's board listened as Damien finished a short presentation labeled Postmortem Project Skynet. The slides were spare. Findings, decision, outcomes, principles reaffirmed. There was no victory lap, only a return to the baseline. A director cleared his throat. There were other ways you could have handled it. There were, Damien said. None of them would have taught our people what we actually believe. The director nodded. The board voted, not on past events, but on the future. Expand the Meridian Partnership. Publish an ethics appendix to all vendor agreements. Embed a line item for dignity review in every system audit. It was bureaucratic poetry, a way to codify the thing you cannot code. That evening, Damien returned to a quiet apartment. He set his phone face down. The city hush as honest as engine noise. On the shelf, the book waited. Meditations softened to the shape of his hand. He opened to the familiar page, found the ink scars of lines underlined on airplanes and in lounges, in triumphant mornings and nights full of second thoughts. He read aloud just once, to the room that did not need impressing. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. He closed the book and put it back, not like a relic, but like a wrench. At the window, planes ghosted across the dark, light stitching patterns that only seemed random. Somewhere up there, a flight attendant remembered a name on a boarding pass. Somewhere, a purser chose policy over appeasement. Somewhere, a passenger in a charcoal suit didn't have to explain himself to anyone. In the end, it wasn't about a canceled contract. It was architecture. You can build on marble and glass and call it an empire, but if the footing is contempt, the first gust of principle will turn it to dust. You can also build on smaller things, habits, names remembered, water with no ice, and find those bricks hold under any weather. Damien watched the sky a little longer, then turned out the light. The room surrendered to quiet. The city continued. The systems hummed. Somewhere, a seat was offered to the person who had paid for it. A $500 million lesson had been learned at altitude. The bill had been paid on the ground. And the final line was simple enough to teach in any cabin on any day. A seat can be taken. A standard must be set. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.